theme was look at any door, and you've always wondered what goes on behind that door. And now just take your craziest idea, and that's what it is in the world of the vampires.
So it's not a computer game.
No, that was tabletop. Though they've been working on a computer game for it. There have been computer games for it, but it was mainly.
So you watch Big Bang a lot?
Uh-huh.
'Cause I was just sitting there thinking because they played
D&D all the time.
I guess that where you read a card and discuss it. Is that what?
No, that was that's more the tabletop, the collectible card games like Magic, and like I did a couple of those, but more like the Dungeons and Dragons, theater of the mind style. Everyone sits around the table, and one person is laying out a scenario, and each of the others is taking on a character and going through that scenario, reacting appropriately, and dealing with the crazy obstacles that show up.
Hello, and welcome again to another installment of DeKalb Talks Tourism. We have a very special guest today, Andrew Greenberg. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. I've been living in DeKalb County now since 1990 and have been making games here most of that time. So it has been a great experience. And for a while, DeKalb County was actually the center of game development in Georgia. It wasn't a big center at that point. It's a much larger industry here now, just like worldwide. It's estimated to be a $300 billion a year industry. And
Wow.
in Georgia, we now have over 160 studios, about an $800 million impact to the state economy, 4,000 folks working in games and simulation development. But yeah, it all kind of started out here in DeKalb. All the studios back in the day were located here, and it was funny when we were doing just tabletop games with a company called White Wolf, where we did games like Vampire the Masquerade, and like we would actually get fans coming to the door, visiting
Wow.
Tucker, visiting Stone Mountain and Tucker, just to come see our offices. They were disappointed because they were offices. We were not living in a mausoleum like they all hoped. But it was always fascinating having folks come to the door and ask for a look around and to talk to us.
So where's your office now?
Now I do the home office. So with my new company, I shouldn't say new, we've been around since 95, Holistic Design. We started it in Tucker and kept it in Tucker for a number of years until the idea of having an office just stopped being that important to us anymore. Everything we could now do from our home offices.
Yeah.
So that company, we've got 4 owners, so we're distributed now around the metro area with the Georgia Game Developers Association. I love having the logo up here.
Yep.
We do have space at colleges, and we do our events at all over the state. We have one coming up. This might be after this is released, but September 12th at Kennesaw State and October 10th at Georgia Tech. But then we'll have a big event in December 15th to 17th down at the World Congress Center. But yeah, most of that can also be done out of a home office now.
So you actually moved to a home office prior to COVID. So
Well before COVID.
so you set the trend that we're now all following.
Sorry, all my friends in commercial real estate.
So tell us, before the show started, we were talking about Dragon Con,
Yeah.
and you're on several panels. If I
That's right.
remember
That's right.
correctly.
Did
So
7
tell us about
panels.
that.
Yeah. So I've been a guest, a speaker at Dragon Con every year except one since 1991, talking about primarily games, but also technology, computers. This year, we were joking, was the all AI. I had 3 panels that were officially on AI, generative AI, and so forth. But every panel I was on at some point turned into a conversation about all the new AI tools that we're using. But Dragon Con is an amazing event. I mean, well over 70, 80,000 people converging on downtown. And this shows the tourism value of games. People are all coming together. And while games is no longer the sole focus of Dragon Con, that's what it started as a convention for gamers run by people who had a game store, and has now turned into this massive fandom where Doctor Who fans, Battlestar Galactica fans, 1 or 2 Trekkies, 1 or 2,000 Trekkies, and many others meet with all the gamers, and all these fandoms converge. They mix. People are loving a lot of different fandoms. I speak on the Electronic Frontiers Foundation track. We were talking about what is new and interesting in technology, as well as the writers track and the video game track and so forth. But It really comes out of the game side, and it attracts so many people. I have given up on meeting people from Georgia when I meet new folks there. They're always from somewhere else. The Vermont. I remember standing in line talking to a guy from Vermont, Minnesota, the West Coast, of course. So it is dramatic how games can be a tourism multiplier. Now we'll have the DreamHack convention at the World Congress Center. That'll be probably at least 40,000 people coming in that we're combining with.
So how would Dragon Con and Comic Con compare to each other?
It's very interesting because their Comic Con is actually older, but it is very much more an industry event now and very much a Hollywood event. A lot of the stuff is sponsored. Dragon Con focuses completely on being the fan event. All the tracks are run by fan volunteers. You're not going to see the movie industry coming out and blanketing it with money like they do San Diego Comic-Con, and there's a lot more diversity. The panels are not necessarily the big main name stars. They're generally the creators, people like myself, as opposed to the faces in front of them. People want to know more about creation. So I do love the fact that people flying from everywhere, and they're going to be all over the metro area, martyring on into Dragon Con, staying out here in DeKalb and taking Marta on in. San Diego Con, very much the same, but this seems like a minor detail, but it makes a major impact. San Diego is focused on the convention center, whereas Dragon Con is all at the hotels with a little bit at the America's Mart downtown, the vending and the like. And the fact that people are going from the rooms, they're going back up to their rooms, they meet someone interesting, they go immediately to some comfortable place to talk and continue the conversations they started in the panels. It makes for a much more, I don't want to say necessarily interactive, but one where those friendships can form a lot more easily. It's a lot more relaxed setting. People talk everywhere. Everyone was realizing that out of the 75,000, 80,000 people in attendance, every single one of them could be their friends, could have a good conversation with them, and in different situations of proximity would probably already be their friend. So you'll see conversations just happening everywhere and continuing over restaurant, the hotel restaurant dinners or bars, and makes for a very interesting experience. In fact, you have fan karaoke in the hotel bars going all the way through it. It's just a dramatic difference. It is very much more focused on the fans than on the industry.
I mean, it's interesting because Friday I wasn't thinking about Dragon Con weekend. So I'm going down the interstate to get off of Cheshire Bridge, and it's backed up. And my son was actually further ahead going to GSU to his sign language class.
Right.
And then he calls me and says, they're parked everywhere. They're not parking spots. They're just parked in the streets. And then it started hitting me. Dragon Con was here. Because then he started talking about people in costumes, and he didn't know what was going on. And that's what I thought, okay, the traffic jam to get where I was going. People parked everywhere, and people in costumes got to be Dragon Con weekend. So it is really a huge activity for Metro Atlanta, and we're excited each year to have that. So you started talking about Dragon Con became big from games.
Right.
You started your career, it appears, on games.
That's right.
So how do you create a game? I mean, I guess I don't understand really any of that part.
You talk to Chat GPT, you say, make me a game, and tells it, no, wait, absolutely not.
So that's a new way to create a game.
No, it definitely isn't, though. It is a supportive tool that definitely is not creating any final product worth looking at right now.
But it is interesting because before you Google everything.
Right.
Now even my kids go, well, Dad, just talk to Chat GPT.
Exactly.
They can't be the answer.
GPT first. No, that's right. So it definitely starts with that concept. What is it you want to create? And for folks who are doing it for the first time, I'm always saying do something very simple that you know you can pull off, because everybody wants to make their next Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or Madden, and that's there's a reason there are 3,000 people working on Call of Duty. It will take that sort of experienced team. But if you want to make your own, be it tabletop or computer games, there are so many tools now to facilitate that. In game development, we have things like Game Maker, Unity, Unreal, which are all free to use.
Wow.
And they're very powerful engines. You pay for some of them when you start actually generating revenue from them, or $1 million in revenue in the case of Unreal. But you can start learning them, start working on them immediately. So yeah, you start with that kernel of an idea. What is it that I want to experience as a player? And how can I make that happen in this game I'm creating? What is it that I want to see happen? And how do I get to that point? And for some people, it is about seeing the world in a new way. We were talking about the Vampire the Masquerade game I did. That was, you played the role of a vampire, but we were in a very different world. Or the world looked exactly the same as what we have now, but if you saw some door in a building, you always wondered what happened behind that. Well, that was where the vampires would dwell, or some bizarre cult was acting or something like that. And so it was a great way to just think about how weird our environment actually could be. And with our Fading Suns game, we wanted to think about what would civilization be like thousands of years in the future, with a lot of major ups and downs in humanity's journey. So we created that.
Was that just like dystopia? Is that
The idea is, how do you get out of dystopia?
dystopia.
That's the focus of the game. They've just hit a horrible period of dystopia, and people are now trying to claw back out of it.
Interesting.
And how do you do that? How do you bring humanity back together? Or if you're, we leave the option open there for for the players to kick everyone back down into the dystopia again.
Because it's interesting, because there's a lot of series out on dystopia, a lot of books. Now you got the games are like on the other side, how to get away from that. So when did you wake up and decide this is what I want to do?
So I moved to DeKalb to work for the Daily Report, which is a legal affairs newspaper here. So I was a reporter covering lawyers, law firms.
So you got bored to death.
I got a little tired of writing about lawyers and started writing about vampires instead. And I'm not going to say the vampires are necessarily a better class of people, but I decided to keep going with that one instead.
There you go. Very cool. Now, did you start the Georgia Game Developers Association?
There are some other folks starting that. Some of them are my chairman, Chris Klaus, was one of the founders and is still involved with it to this day. I was starting a convention. We'd all seen the same effect. In the late 90s, we had a pretty thriving game industry here. Not to the size it is now, but it was pretty thriving. We had Turner had a branch. Others were forming. There were a number of successful game companies here. And then the economic crash of 2000, 2001 kicked in. And all of the companies but two disappeared, mine and a friend's. Both in DeKalb. Actually, for a while, we shared an office out in what's now Brookhaven. So part of the reason it collapsed was there was no real core entity to keep people here. So I started the Southern Interactive Entertainment and Game Expo. It was going to be our big convention, and friends were starting this organization. We merged efforts starting in 2005, and we had the first Siege, Southern Interactive Entertainment and Game Expo, in 2007. And the two have been, well, now they are the combined effort, but that's really what kept us going over. I took over the GGDA in 2012 as executive director. We lobby at the state on behalf of the video game industry, as well as the entertainment industry. Video games are included in the Entertainment Investment Act, which has made Georgia the hub for entertainment industries in the world, not just the United States.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It has been an amazing, and it's also meant an interesting partnership with film and music, which are pretty natural partnerships. But it's been interesting watching this change. So my first computer game was called Dracula Unleashed, obviously had Vampire the Masquerade. So Viacom New Media, Viacom was starting a computer game side at the time, sought me out to work on their Dracula game. It was going to be one of their very first CD-ROM games. This tells you how old it was. For those of you watching, we had debates over whether we should allow it to be played on dual speed if CD-ROM plays. Remember, 2x CD-ROM, or only on single speed. That's how long ago this was.
I didn't know there were games back then.
So we wrote a lot of dialogue for that. And it was filmed. I mean, we had actors acting out what was going on, and your choices as a player showed you what scene happened next. And you were in a race against time to stop Dracula's predations upon humanity, and so we had a lot of fun with it. It did well, though I think Viacom at that point was expecting movie numbers, which it did not do, but it did well, and there were sequels and the like. Well, not direct sequels, similar things came out of Viacom New Media for it. But there was this idea that we were going to have a convergence of film and games. And George Lucas, started a game company which made some very good games along this same idea. Had some great people working with him. But the technology wasn't quite there yet. And now we're really getting to that point. In addition, there's the people who've been playing games and watching movies have been so delighted, which is why until I think just this week, the Mario Brothers movie was the best, had done the best of any movies until Barbie kicked it off. And of course, there are Barbie games too. So we could say it was 2 game movies winning this year so far. But in any case, now you're seeing this convergence more and more. And the term now is transmedia, where to be a successful property, you want to be across a lot of media using your same IP. Walking Dead, filmed here in Georgia, is a great example of that. So it started with a wonderful comic book, went to the TV show. They've had games. Some of the games are made here in Georgia and have just been moving across media. I actually like a lot of the Walking Dead music, too. So good soundtrack work as well. And this is now the goal. And one of the beautiful things about games is when you're developing an IP, an intellectual property in the game, you have to create all this background material because you have to be ready for a lot more circumstances that might pop up than you would when you're doing a scripted narrative where you can decide exactly what's going to happen. When I'm making a game, I can set the parameters, but players are always going to do things I would never think about. So I have to keep those in mind as best I can. So you're seeing more and more games being the basis for the IP, which are then brought into other platforms, the fiction, the film, the TV, etc. And I think this is a great opportunity, the idea that all of these can come together. We do this with our own games at Holistic Design. When we set up the name, and I will admit one of the other names we thought of was Stone Mountain Games, because my partners were living in Stone Mountain at the time.
Okay.
Is that we could take an intellectual property and approach it from a lot of different ways. So with our own Fading Suns line of games, we have this Emperor of the Fading Suns computer game. Very proud that we released this in 1997, and it's still selling today. Which was this grand strategy game where you're one of the 5 leading nobles of the far future battling for control over the human race. And your war can either tear humanity apart a lot more or build it up. And then as soon as that game ended, suddenly you had our tabletop role-playing game where you've played a single individual, not nearly of that power level, trying to rebuild this torn humanity right after the war ends. How do you rebuild it after this desolate time has kicked in? And then we had miniatures games with little spaceships where you could fly through space and zap around with each other and explore. And then we'd had the fiction, which could look at all sorts of different aspects of it. And then we had a live action game where you get together with your friends and argue the grand politics of the future and of religion in the future, and so forth. And I think this is what's great about transmedia. You can take these intellectual properties and look at them in so many different ways. With Walking Dead, they did this pretty nicely, even though, comic books, they're focusing on specific characters, and the TV show's doing the same. But the physical way you look at it is a little different, and that's what I kind of love. There were some of the black and white Walking Dead comics, which were just kind of fascinating in the broad look. And then in the TV shows, they're digging down to really specific, cool images they can create and giving you different looks into this setting. So I'm looking forward to a lot more of those coming out.
Well, you talk about multiple concepts. That kind of leads me into the DeKalb Film and Entertainment Commission.
Absolutely.
So talk a little bit about, you're a board member. I think you're the chair of it this year.
I'm the chair, that's right.
So talk a little bit about that organization.
So in 2012, I was appointed to the first state advisory commission on film, music, and digital entertainment.
Okay.
So that's with the Department of Economic Development here in Georgia. We've got this great tax credit program in place. How do we actually build a sustainable industry out of it? Mm-hmm. So I started working on that, and we were having great success. Immediately, you see the success the state has had. That's in huge measure due to the great team down at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, from the very top, where you have Pat Wilson, Lee Thomas specifically, who's the state film commissioner, Craig Dominy, who's the locations guy. Just great work that they do at the state level. But it's good to have this advisory body of people from film, music, games, etc. to help direct and give input. And I was realizing that in DeKalb at the time, while film was already big around the state, and especially in Atlanta, we were getting almost nothing out here in DeKalb. So I started talking to the county commissioners. Well, why don't we start a county version of this? We're just leaving money on the table.
Right.
And a couple of the commissioners, Stan Watson and Jeff Red, were very receptive to the idea, and we saw exactly what I was talking about. All this was happening around DeKalb and not in DeKalb. So in 2015, we started the DeKalb Film, Music, and Digital Entertainment Office, which is now the DeKalb Entertainment Commission. And we found a group of great professionals here to be on it. Beth Talbert, who's now in charge of NBC Universal here in DeKalb. The Screen Actors Guild were included in it. The schools were included in it. And we put it together, formed the office, started doing more permitting here, and now a huge percentage of what gets filmed in Georgia gets filmed here. And you see this in the tourism here. I can go drink in the bars where the Tonya Harding movie was shot, some of its scenes. I can shop in stores where Jennifer Aniston has been seen in movies shopping. You can go to places which were filmed for Black Panther. It's just amazing the amount of stuff. I use Tucker as a great example for this. Tucker's been a city for less than a decade, and you've already got multiple Golden Globe winners that have been shot here, Oscar winners that have been shot here. I remember going to a post office not far from here where there used to be an Italian restaurant as well, and pulling on in to go to the post office, and I'd forgotten that we had permitted Clint Eastwood's Mule to shoot there that day. So I go in, the place is packed. The parking lot's packed. I'm thankful they let me through to the post office, but there's Clint Eastwood standing out there talking to the police officer who's assigned to the shoot.
Well, it's like we had, it's not Bond, but he was Bond.
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yep. Hanging out on downtown.
Yeah, because we drove by the building, and you can see where in the movie they were shooting it all up and all.
Exactly.
And he was out there, and people got to see him, and big traffic jam and all. Still got to see him. So it's very cool that we have all that in DeKalb. And
it's all over DeKalb. That's the other great part. I mean, Lithonia, Stonecrest has its entertainment commission now. We had Doom Patrol being shot down well south of I-20. So it is the one industry that we know can thrive anywhere in the county.
And the cool thing is, a lot of stuff appears to be in Atlanta. A lot of stuff seems to be homed out of Conyers, Covington, and we're right there in the middle of the shooting, going from both sides, because they have their bases, and I think they come out into our area and do so much filming and shooting. And so, tell us a little bit about esports. How does it fall into all this components?
So you might not understand this, James, but I'm sure your kids do. Watching video games being played is a lot of fun as well. And to be honest, you do understand this, because you used to watch people at the arcades play video games as well. And this is actually, in my opinion, one of the reasons video games became so successful early on. If you think of the Atari, it was in the living room. We talk about those as couch games. You sat there and played multiplayer games. You played with a friend sitting on the couch, and there are probably friends sitting around. I want the next turn. I want the next turn. But they were watching. It was a social event. It was a social occasion. And it wasn't until till later that we started getting the ideas of games as a solitary pursuit. So video games started social. Pong, the very first one, the AI was nothing. You really needed a second person knocking that blip back at you to have a positive experience. So then we got the idea that games were individual. And then in the 90s, we started to break out of this again, and people started watching games. And we started having the first tools to allow you to broadcast your gameplay over the internet to other players. Had to have the internet first, had to have access to the internet, and then we had to have these tools like Shout and others to actually allow you to show the games. And suddenly it became very apparent that this can be a lot of fun to watch if you're a player. I mean, to be honest, how exciting is American football to watch if you don't understand American football?
Right.
But if you understand it, it's pretty fascinating. Soccer is European football is the other great example thereof. So this really started pushing in Japan, in Asia. I shouldn't say Japan, Korea especially, South Korea especially is where it started, where most people who wanted to play computer games went to public locations, the bongs, where they would have a bunch of computers set up. You could jump on and play. So again, here you could physically watch each other's games again. And then the idea was, well, I want to stream this out. We have the first streaming tools. Let's broadcast it out to other people to watch. And what I especially love about the tools used for streaming is the interactivity with the fans. It's not like watching Monday Night Football where you just hear, back in our day, Howard Cosell being annoying.
Yeah.
And now you might hear others talking, but in modern games, the people who are watching are doing as much of the commentary as the commentator. And I love that, hearing their insights, seeing their insights, some of their trolling to get them banned out of there. But a lot of good insights come from those conversations, and it builds up that level of participation even more. So now we've got Twitch and YouTube and so forth, where you can watch other people play games, and the major streamers are making millions upon millions of dollars, and game streaming is the biggest thing they do. I think it is still the case that gaming is the biggest overall category on YouTube, and Minecraft streaming is the biggest, most specific category they have on YouTube of everything.
And Minecraft's been around for so long.
Minecraft has now been around for for quite a while, but with Microsoft buying it, it became a little more streamable. But people love playing it and want to see other people doing it, and I love the fact that you can play it and watch someone playing it at the same time and get ideas and do things accordingly. That's another one of the fun things about esports. I'm not going to play either American football or European football again.
You can do this.
But I can play everything that I'm watching the game stream, the esports players play. And the prize pools now for this have gotten tremendous. I mean, the biggest ones, Dota out on the West Coast, League of Legends. We had the League of Legends semifinals at the State Farm Arena here in Atlanta, packed that place for 3 days. 2 days, 3 days, something like that. I mean, the multi-million-dollar prize pools much bigger than Wimbledon, for instance. So huge amounts of money going on into it. But even the smaller events, at DreamHack events and so forth, hundreds of thousands of dollars going out in prize pools for people winning at these esports games. So yes, there is a career in playing video games. And we'll see more and more of this. So it is Georgia High School Association has included esports as a lettering activity. So you can get a letter for esports just like you can get a letter for playing football. And my understanding, it is the fastest growing sport that the state has ever had. And well over 150, probably around 200 high schools now around the state with a competitive esports program. And they have their championship down at the, is it called the Coliseum at University of West Georgia? I think it's the Coliseum at a big location down at the University of West Georgia. And the finals are streamed out on Playverse and Twitch, so people can watch. If they can't go to the game, they can watch the games get played, and we're seeing some very talented kids come out of that and get scholarship offers, because, yes, there are a lot of scholarships now for esports. And this is where I've been seeing a lot of the growth happening of late, is on that pseudo-amateur level, because we started the Georgia Esports League for colleges. And I expect it to mostly be the schools with good computer science programs. I've thought that's where the basics for all these kids would be. But then we had Oglethorpe reach out to us about joining, because as they phrased it, these were the rising freshmen they wanted. These were kids who were enthusiastic, passionate, had a affinity for technology, and were used to working in teams, which apparently is the hardest thing for them to find now, and that they are having to teach to college kids. So boys and girls who had been competing in esports were exactly what they wanted at a liberal arts school like Oglethorpe. So they created an esports club for
So there's not like a go-to degree?
No, though we have worked with schools to have esports degrees. Morris Brown is implementing one. GSU has an esports-related degree. The Georgia Film Academy has a
talk a little bit about that. That's all across the state, I believe.
That's right. The main place where they teach is at Skillshot in DeKalb County.
Right.
So that is the main location for it. But right, they do pull from all over. And this is all about production. It's more about the production side than about the competition side. How do you do a competition? How do you run teams? How do you run events? And so forth.
Now, Skillshots, is that the one that's right over there by the MARTA station?
That's right. In Lindbergh MARTA station.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's a very cool facility.
Yeah.
I mean, you had me go over there and tour that one day. That's very neat.
We're doing an event there on October 4th called the Atlanta World Digital Summit, and we're going to be having a good look at gaming, film, etc., music. Dallas Austin will be talking there. I'm bringing in the editor of PC Gamer to talk there.
Oh,
So
wow.
October 4th. I think that'll be after this podcast has been released. It'll be a great event for anyone to head out there and buy tickets to get an idea of what the cutting edge opportunities are in DeKalb County and in Atlanta in general.
Well, the cool thing is, with her being able to edit it, she can go in and like pull a reels out for what you just now said, and be able to promote that on our social media page.
Come to DeKalb County, holistic-design.com, ggda.org.
Yeah. Perfect. So how we know the writer strikes and all
Right.
the thing has affected film.
Exactly.
So if you have any shared insight to that, or is the gaming side being affected by any of this?
Gaming side is not. So
Okay.
we have to own the content anyway, but we usually own it for specific intellectual properties.
And yours is all, I guess, coders.
Well, but we need those graphic elements. So if there's something called motion capture, where an actor moves around, we capture those motions, and then we can animate it even more than what that person already did.
Okay.
So we need to have rights to go ahead and alter that beyond what the person did, because we don't know until the game is about to ship what are all the moves we need, how's it going to look, do we need to change pointy ears to round ears, et cetera, et cetera. So you need those rights, and maybe you want those rights for the sequel to keep modifying. I think it's inappropriate to take these rights for everything you do, though there are some packages of this animation, but it's not usually tied to, say, this is big name actor Jane Smith's moves. This is a generic set of data that I can use to define how a 3D model can move and die and jump around and so forth. But yeah, when you're taking people-specific data, we'll usually take it for a game or for the derivative works of that game, but not for everything about that person.
Right.
So, but it'll be interesting to see if contracts get changed around again as a result. Of course, that's not all this is. I mean, the big issue is the streaming revenue, that writers and actors aren't getting the cut they expected of this. And it's interesting seeing people talk about, will the traditional studios break away from the streaming services and create a separate contract? I don't know. That has been one of the things that I've been hearing bandied about of late. It's not going. Obviously, the strike's not going to go on forever. Both sides do need to come to agreement at some point. There are interesting pressures on the streaming services. That model still isn't really solid as to how that's going to be a big money-making effort. For a company like Disney, it really needs to be all about that intellectual property, and I think it is. The streaming service is only one aspect of it. They're going to make the money in so many different ways. I mean, I can't think how many CDs of Frozen music at the house. Now, yes, we still play CDs at the house, but there are economic pressures on the streaming services that need to be dealt with. But they also have to be treating all the talent fairly and making sure that talent can not only continue to prosper, but that there's a reason for a new generation of talent to come into effect. The idea that every movie might have Bruce Willis in it from here on, as much as I've liked some of his work, isn't that appealing.
Right.
So we need to make sure that not only are we supporting this generation, but what is in place will bring in a new generation of talent that will create great things that you and I can't even conceive of right now. So at some point it'll end, and then production is going to be back into major swing here.
Yeah, we definitely need that to be ending soon, because, I mean, it's amazing, because we always talk from this realm of CVBs and entertainment commissions on the economic impacts. But you have the other side of the equation, and just simply as like last night I was watching Tulsa King with my youngest son who hadn't seen the series. I've already watched it the first or second time. I'm going, well, it's not going to be to who knows when do we find out what happens.
Right.
So it's on a personal level that this strike is affecting people, not just the job aspect of it for them, the economic impact of it for us, but the individual person just sitting around.
That's right.
Going, I've got invested in this show.
Yep.
Like Yellowstone. I mean, so
And we've had two of these disruptions now. I mean, we had the
Yep.
pandemic come, and thankfully there's a lot of stuff in the can because everybody was watching everything nonstop.
Mhm.
But nothing was being created during the first year of nothing new was coming out in the first year of the pandemic. It was only the stuff that was in the can.
Right.
Then we started allowing filming here and elsewhere, and the union, IOTC, thank goodness, came up with a really good way to keep everyone safe so that no sets had to get shut down here in Georgia. Great job ensuring safety for crew and everybody, and stuff came out. But then you had all this demand from Netflix, Amazon, et cetera, for new content. So all this new content was getting pushed out. And I don't think there's as much in the can as there was. So if we have a strike for a while, it's going to be exactly that experience.
Well, my middle son works at a big movie theater, and they're discussing every day, nothing is going to be big next year. So what is these big theaters going to run?
Right. It can't be. What's her name? The singer. Why am I blanking on her name? Goodness gracious!
I know exactly who you're talking
And for
about.
someone who's in the music industry too, this
He's going to be having all the
Yes,
theaters.
all the theaters showing.
ramping
You
up
can't
for
have musicians showing.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. Thank you.
Yeah, because
You can't have Taylor Swift doing a new concert one every week.
right.
So there does have to be other. I love the idea though. Again, this is that kind of convergence idea. Music should have had a bigger role in movie studios and on TV all along.
True.
So people are saying, why is a concert being shown in here? No, that's great. And I mean, when you and I grew up, there are a lot of concert movies that were great. Stop Making Sense by Talking Heads. I can't remember what the Led Zeppelin was. Jimi Hendrix had a great one out there. There are all these. Pink Floyd, The Wall is kind of the classic.
Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine with the Beatles, exactly. So I love this idea of great musical experiences happening outside of the concert arena as well.
Now you're making me go way back to the Monkees. So it is interesting how we're like coming full forward again from that many years ago doing this now.
Right. But I love that idea. I mean, there's no reason not to enjoy the things we love the most in a variety of different settings in a variety of different ways.
So what is your opinion is the future of, and you can pick any of them, all of them, the future of this industry?
Yeah, there is going to be more of a convergence between them. First of all, the skills are becoming more aligned. There's a tool called the Unreal Engine done by Epic Games out of North Carolina that is now the basis for most movies, for special effects in movies. It's done in the Unreal Game Engine, and they're hiring folks from the Georgia Game Developers Association to help them implement this. So you have to have folks who are live on it, and then that's their post-production and so forth. So it started with the skills really being intertwined, and there are intellectual property holders who are trying to build up this set of assets that they can use across them. So if they make a model for a game, they can use it in the movie. If they make a model in the movie, they can use it in the game. Again, if they're basing it on an actor, that actor should be compensated accordingly.
Right.
But we're getting this opportunity now to use these tools across, and games are looking more and more realistic, as real as they can be when people are being using blasters and such. But we talked about Call of Duty before, making it look very much like a movie. Madden series out of Orlando. That game, they are making TV football look more like Madden because all these Madden players want to look like Madden more and more. The lines on the field that started out that the players can't see, but the audience can. Players are taking their moves out of Madden now. So you're starting to see that convergence already. And you'll see more of it with the skills, with the content itself, with the promotions. I love the idea that there's an excellent that there's a Super Mario Brothers movie. It is super. And but the game itself is still showing up all these different ways, between Mario Kart and the platformers and so forth, giving the people who love these settings and characters more and more ways to interact with them. So that's the main benefit we'll see. And virtual reality is a thing, and you'll see more and more of this come in. The location-based virtual reality we have here in DeKalb over at Atomic, where they've put in a few different, I think Van Gogh was down at the Van Gogh Interactive Experience was down there, the Monet Experience. You'll start seeing a lot of these very classic properties.
Pullman Yards?
Yeah, Pullman Yards, Atomic.
Have you been to the exhibition hub in Doraville?
I have not.
It
What's the
has
second one?
right now. It's got Van Gogh
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah,
Art
yeah,
of the
yeah,
Brick.
yeah. I've not been in there yet. My daughter has.
And then later on, it's going to be Van Gogh and Tutankhamun.
Right, right. And I love that sort of idea. Great ways to explore interesting aspects of history. History is obviously one of my passions. My games, Emperor of the Fading Suns, very much a look at history. My Machiavelli the Prince game was pulled straight out of history. And yes, you can still get these games on GOG.com, GOG.com.
Oh, wow.
Ancient games you can still get there, and they're still a lot of fun. But in any case, yeah, you're going to get more of this sort of convergence. And what we've been talking about, one of the things about AI is that idea of a more personalized narrative for you. So if I want to see Barbie with less pink and more blue, I can have the computer make that happen for me. If I want to have myself in the Oppenheimer movie, I don't know what role I'd play. If I want myself in there, I can put myself in there to some degree. The Mario movie is probably a better example for that. But this is a big goal that all the major studios are already looking at. And game devs have been looking at this for a while. How do we let the player... So we've been personalizing avatars in a game for a long time. I can make an avatar that looks fairly close to me. My daughter is a big player for Sims 4. She loves putting her parents in the game. I hope we don't die in horrible toaster accidents. But she's already designing characters who look like us. And you'll be able to do more of that. Put yourself into the games. Have dialogues with yourselves. I have an accelerator, startup accelerator for companies making technology for the video game industries. And one of the startups was a combination of folks from Georgia Tech and Emory who are developing or working on a theory that folks who are unable to think of themselves older or in the future are more prone toward emotional or cognitive difficulties. So they create a virtual avatar of yourself that is aged, and then they are creating a large language model that you can allow it to have a conversation with yourself. And it'll be realistic. I put them in touch with some really good game writers to help.
So I can talk with myself when I'm like 80?
Exactly. Now, think of this maybe more for college students or teens.
No, but I'm sitting there like, what would I say at 80?
Stay in the cab.
Yeah. Yes.
But in any case, this tool could be also something that could allow them to put you in a game. Put an older version of you as a quest giver or something like that, and think how much fun that would be. The game could just put a slot there. If you've done this, boom, it takes out the one character it has who looks like the old sage lady, and instead puts it in with yourself to give a quest.
Oh, that's very cool.
So we'll be seeing more of that coming out too. And the movies want to do this as well, personalized experiences.
I'm going to ask, the Super Mario movie, is it live like Barbie or is it animated?
I didn't see it. I'm pretty sure it was animated.
Okay, because Barbie, I guess, was live. So,
yeah. But with a lot of great, easy to do effects. So
I haven't seen the movie, so it's...
Yep, I did not see Mario. I'm sorry.
You have to go see Mario, I guess.
I have to go see Mario.
Sure, you can stream it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yep, probably.
Well,
it wasn't filmed in Georgia. That's why I haven't gone to see it.
There you go. That's a good recovery. Before we close, any great story you want to tell?
Let's see. What's a good story for us to close out on? Well, what I love to see in DeKalb and elsewhere are the students who are exploring creative arts, because I know they're going to come up with things that I'm never going to come up with. And one of the things I love about DeKalb is, just anecdotally, the game industry here is the most ethnically diverse one I've seen anywhere in the world. China, Europe, etc.
Makes sense, though, being DeKalb.
Never seen the diversity we have in this region. And so I'm very hopeful, because as long as game developers all look like me, we're going to kind of always be getting the same sort of games.
Right.
And just selfishly, I want a much broader game developer base, because I'm going to get games I never would have thought of. Tetris came out of Russia by some crazy Russian. I never would have thought of that, and now we think of that as a basis of the industry.
That's a very cool movie, I will say.
With the DJs at DragonCon mixing the Tetris music into their beats was pretty crazy.
I wanted to go buy an old Game Boy, I guess it was, just because of that movie. And I don't like games, but I wanted to go get one. I researched, and my wife's like, you don't need one of those.
But I mean, that's the perfect example. This guy from Russia, I would never thought of it. We got game dev now coming out of Africa. They're making games I would never have thought about. This game called Flappy Birds, which was a major craze right before the pandemic, came out of Vietnam. No one else had thought about it, and then there were a million clones of it the next day. So as we bring in new groups, new areas, and Atlanta is great for this. We're going to bring up in populations whose voice has not been heard in game development, and it's going to create whole new experiences for people. So if you're watching and you don't think of yourself as someone who could be a game developer or even a filmmaker, the tools are free now. They're easy to get. You're carrying a camera in your pocket right now that you can make a movie. The computers you have at home or at school can let you make a game. No reason not to do it now.
Just amazing. So excited you've been on our show. Learned a lot today. So, Andrew, thank you for being on, and big news in the future. Feel free to come back to the show.
Absolutely. And I hope to see you October 4th at the Atlanta World Digital Summit and December 15th to 17th at Siege at DreamHack Atlanta.
Great. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to another DeKalb Talks Tourism podcast.